All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming this afternoon. My name is James Worley, and I'm at Internet 2, which is our national not-for-profit research and education network that connects, about 25-30% of all public libraries to the internet via various state and regional research and education networks. And I'll let Carson introduce himself as well.
Thank you very much. I'm Carson Block. I'm a library technology consultant. Extremely excited to work on this extremely effective program that we've been running for the last 3 years. Yeah, it's been a while.
All right, so we want to just sort of give you guys an update on what we've done with this IMLS grant. What we're going to do is kind of start off with a little bit. Sorry about that. We'll give you a little bit of background on Internet 2, a little bit more information about Internet 2, and why we sort of went after this grant and how it kind of fits into our mission. But I'm just curious, has anybody heard of Internet 2 before? Okay. It's not surprising to see not very many hands going up. It's a sort of obscure organization, but it has been around since 1996, and its purpose and mission is to primarily serve a membership body which is largely composed of four-year research universities, and they all sort of own and operate the organization and the network that it provides. And the network is one of the fastest, if not the fastest, telecommunication network in the world. And it's different from the commodity internet, not in terms of protocols and how it's structured from a technical perspective necessarily. It still uses the same TCP, IP, and protocols and all of that sort of thing that drive the commercial internet. But its purpose is really to support research efforts at these big universities, as well as education at the higher ed level, but also informally and formally across the education spectrum. So that's where libraries are definitely part of the mission that we serve, the group that we serve, as well as K-12 schools and community colleges, performing arts centers, and other cultural and historic organizations. So you can kind of see from this map where the membership organizations are located. There are also quite a few organizations from industry and other affiliate and government members as well. And in terms of international reach, it does say there's about 65 plus international partners, and what we mean by that are other national research and education networks that are similar to Internet 2 that exist all around the globe. And so all these networks are sort of integrated and peer together and have similar missions. All right, so I direct something called the Community Anchor Program, which is an effort within Internet 2 to connect the K-12 schools and libraries and other non-big research universities to Internet 2. And this is done through state and regional education networks, as I mentioned earlier. And here you can see this map shows in green which of the states actually have research and education networks that currently connect to Internet 2. So if you're from one of the states, there's a good chance that your library or whatever organization you're from is connected to Internet 2, whether you realize it or not. I'll mention Nevada is another state that is in the offing. They're looking currently at the efficacy of setting up their own research and education network currently, as is Mississippi. So we're hopeful that we'll add a couple more states this year to the map, and ultimately our goal is to get every state and every school and every library connected to this advanced research and education capacity, networking capacity. Okay, so that kind of brings us a little background on the internet too, and our mission. That kind of brings us to our interest in libraries and helping to promote better connectivity and understanding of broadband in the libraries, public and tribal around the country. So we went after an IMLS education grant, and we called Toward Gigabit Libraries. We were successful in getting that grant way back in, it seems like forever.
Yeah.
Way back in,
Yes.
in spring of 2016. It's like another lifetime ago. Subsequently, we've done a lot of work, which we're really happy to share. But what we did on this grant was really target not just libraries in general, but specifically very rural and public libraries as well as tribal libraries. So these were typically libraries that were sort of standalone entities, not part of a larger system. And the reason we targeted these libraries is we really thought, okay, if our goal is to try to develop education materials to improve a librarian's understanding of their broadband connections so they can improve it as well as advocate for better connectivity, where is the most need? And we realized that quickly realized it was primarily in these standalone libraries that don't have access necessarily to IT shop to help advise them on these matters. It's really the librarian, maybe the one and only librarian, who's handling IT. And so it's a pretty challenging environment to construct and manage what can be kind of complicated broadband connectivity. So
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing too to think about the purpose of the grant, we have all this connection on the last mile of connectivity in rural America. It's still a huge problem. It's not solved, but we have a lot of attention on it. Guess where we have very little attention? It's on the last 100 meters of connectivity. That's the connectivity inside each library, which is, as I could attest before, and we can attest even strongly now, is very much challenged, and it needs help, especially as we learned in concert with E-rate cycles, with E-rate funding being able to help fund internal connections, where in the past there were not monies for that. Bless you. This is really funny to have this size of a crowd and this size of a room together. So we're going to pretend like we're all just right together, huddled in a corner. So bless you. But that was the intention that we were trying to do, is really look at those things internally. And we had this big, hairy, audacious goal, which at some level we thought was impossible and possible at the same time. And that's, could we create a toolkit that could be self-guided by a practitioner in a library, by somebody working in that library to figure things out? Because anyone who works in rural libraries knows that a lot of times you're on your own. There might be a person who provides the support of the technology assistance for that library, and they need all the help they can get. So that was our guiding principle. Mm-hmm. And talk about the project goal, James.
Yeah. We were stunned, sort of, when we were compiling statistics, to realize, wow, we committed to 30 libraries in, I think, 5 states.
Yeah.
And we managed to visit, with the help of our partners, over, right about 60 libraries, double what we had hoped to do. In how many states, Carson?
That'll be in the
Well, I can't rattle that stat off, but we ran ourselves somewhat ragged.
I should know that.
I should know that too.
Like that.
I should know that too. Well, we have a map
lot.
for that.
That's a lot.
Yeah, definitely more than we had committed to in the grant.
Yes.
So we were pleased at that. And the reasons, I think, partially is because when you go to rural America, it's not exactly, when you get into a little town, your expenses are pretty low, let's say. You're having dinner at the Jackpot grocery store, but there's just no restaurant to be had. And so we budgeted quite a bit for travel, and we ended up coming well under. So we just plowed that money back into visiting more sites.
Yeah, expenses are surprisingly affordable, which is really good. It was good to parlay that right back into things. And I think also what helped is we did our first presentation on this for a big group, probably to the wrong audience. It was the right audience. It was COSLA, the chief operating folks of state libraries. And of course we said we really had a lot of success for this. So what do you think state librarians did when they heard that there was a successful program that affected someone in their state that we had not included yet? What do you think they did? do you think they might have asked for us to come and visit? Well, they certainly did.
Yeah.
And it actually created some great opportunities and kind of a challenge for us too logistically, because we didn't have a framework to take on that many, but we still were able to do that with the partnerships. It's just been a great project.
Yeah. So we'll talk a little bit about the process we used to develop that toolkit, which we'll also go into more detail so you can get a better sense for what it is we mean by a toolkit. But we really took a real iterative approach to this. So we drafted something initially with feedback from our advisory panel that we put together of folks from the library community, including a lot of state librarians and folks from staff from state libraries. We had some research and education networking folks that had a lot of experience serving libraries and broadband. We had librarians themselves from across the country help inform this initial drafting of the toolkit. And once we had something we thought was sort of credible, we decided, okay, let's take it out and get on the road with it and get in front of librarians and get in the door and sit down with them. And so we did. That was the piloting process. Was scheduling time with the librarians and going through the toolkit. As Carson said, it's kind of designed to be ultimately like a self-paced thing where you can do on your own. But as part of, while we're piloting it, we wanted to be present and see, okay, where's a question necessarily you're not coming across, like is it confusing how we worded it, that sort of thing. So we really wanted to be on the right there in person to see how it was being interpreted, and we could plow all those lessons learned into iterations. I think we've done like 3 or 4 different iterations of the thing
we have,
easily.
Yeah.
So finally, we've gotten to a point now where I think we're sort of at the end of the iterative process, and we've got, I think, what is pretty much close to like the release version to share with the country. Do you want to do this one?
Yeah, sure. The toolkit itself is designed to be 3 different things all at the same time, in and as unintimidating format as we can make. And so it's an educational workbook. It's also a self-assessment tool and also an advocacy platform. And you might wonder, that sounds like a lot of complicated stuff. As we know, if we have good vision, we can actually accomplish things like that within the context and the framework of the toolkit itself. And so the toolkit itself is broken down into different components and processes. So at the bottom, if you're like a process person and like to see a diagram, you can see our linear process for that. Up at the top, though, these are the major sections of the toolkit, and this is within these major sections we were able to do the assessment pieces, of course, but also the advocacy pieces, because like the commercials say, the more you know, shooting star. They never finish that sentence, though. They just say the more you know. So I'm thinking the more you know, the better off you are. And so that was our idea here. But we also know that this was also highly technical information that we needed to ask what we were assuming non-technical staff to be able to fill out. But still, we needed to make sure it was based around what is your broadband connection like, your wired internal network, what is it like, what are your network devices, what are you trying to do there? How about Wi-Fi? That's one of our biggest growing services in all parts of the world, not just in rural places. And be sure to talk to Jim Duncan at the end of the session. He's got some awesome approach to that in Colorado. Also, operations support. It's really important because a lot of times in a rural area, the support options are limited. Oftentimes we see wonderfully passionate, good people helping the library. Once in a while, we see a stinker, somebody who shouldn't be helping the library at all. They're doing a bad job. So we needed to have a safe way to suss that out for the library worker to start saying, I don't have to take no for an answer on this. And that sort of thinking is very empowering. And so I wanted to illustrate that so you could see how this becomes an advocacy platform. And in terms of some of the other questions too, a lot of times there are discussions with the library and other partners in the city or in the community, like the city government. And sometimes, and I'll tell you a story, sometimes the libraries pass by unless they enter into this. So that was the structure of the toolkit. Below, we had to have a process so that we made sure we were helping the right people. When I worked in Colorado on a program of assessment, It was a really good program, except I went to one library that was in, well, I'll just call them out because they're wonderful. They're good people. They signed up because they saw that this free assessment was available. It was Nederland, Colorado. So how many people here are familiar with Nederland, Colorado? Just one person from Colorado is familiar. Let me set the scene, and Jim, you tell me if I'm accurate or not. You've heard that Boulder is a weird place, right? Okay, Nederland is where the weird people from Boulder go when Boulder is too normal for them. Is that right? Okay, all right. So, but there's also a lot of well-heeled weird people, wonderfully weird people in Nederland. And so I get up to Nederland and I walk in and I see A1 enterprise class equipment for a library that is the size of two of these podiums. Well, not that small, but figuratively that. I mean, I'm seeing Cisco routers, Meraki equipment. It's all top shelf stuff. I talked to the library director. She says, yes, one of our board members works for, blah, 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 international company, and she designed this and put it in for us. And I said, you really didn't need me to visit. And she goes, well, but I didn't know that. I didn't know I didn't need you to visit. So what we wanted to do, though, and that's kind of a funny story, for this grant, we wanted to make sure that we didn't make the same mistake, because the logistics and planning and everything there's a lot of time and money involved. We wanted to make sure we were targeting those who are most in need. And so that's the purpose of the process below, so that we had some way to interview and to vet to make sure we were actually getting to places that would benefit directly from this experience. We didn't know what would happen with the grant, but we knew that people were going to be spending their time with us in a busy library in a rural community. We wanted to make sure that they had a takeaway, like when we left, that they went, I'm glad I did that, instead of, I'm sorry I did that.
Yeah, and Carson, I think Carson kind of struck on something really important that we didn't, maybe we thought about, but we didn't anticipate the importance of it or realize the importance of it until we got out in the field. And that was around operational support, was trying to bring together groups within the community that cared passionately about the library, about broadband, wanted to help, but there hadn't been connections made. And so, yeah, we really tried to broker those kinds of local connections again, so that there was some sustainability after we were gone, where they had, a document, great, that itemizes their current state of broadband, but then actually had identified people that they can continue to work with locally and just help strengthen those existing relationships or create new ones. And that happened time and time again across the country in the libraries and the communities we visited, which was great. I thought that was a really cool outcome as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So here you're getting a little bit of a view. Is that blurry to you guys, or it looks blurry for me?
Is it kind of blurry? I'll come down and see if I can. I love having this intimate group. I'm just going to run down and chat. I'm on the AV squad. I'll be right back.
All right. Well, yeah, I just noticed it looked a little blurrier than we started. It's too early in the day for it to be blurry. All right. So the toolkit approach again was we designed it to be sort of a question, pose a question, and then allow some time for the librarian to think about the question and provide some context to help them understand the question and answer the question for themselves. So usually the way we set it on the layout where questions posed, and then right below it is that help text. Here we have sort of the help text on the side, but in the actual document it's arrayed kind of top to bottom. So it's a fairly big document, but that's how we ended up organizing it, and we got some good feedback that people really liked. Oftentimes they would say, I have no idea what you mean by digital subscriber line, DSL. What is that? Like, I think I have that, but I have no idea what it is. So we provide some links to help people understand. Well, this is what DSL is, and this is what it is relative to cable, or a fiber-based connection, or a fixed wireless. So they could help understand what it is they had. Sometimes it was more than one of the above there. Okay, so here's the lovely map that is, it just gives you a sense for where we've been. The ones in red are a couple libraries in Pennsylvania that we still anticipate getting to but haven't yet. The rest in blue are those are libraries that either Carson and I have visited personally, or another member of the project team, Susanna Spellman, who's since moved on, visited herself, or in some cases, we would visit, Carson and I would visit, do a couple of site visits in a state to orient and kind of train someone from the state library, a partner we're working with at the state library, or someone from a university that we're partnering with, or maybe it was someone from the local research and education network, so they could sit down with us and see how we would go through the site visits, and then they would carry on without us, do subsequent visits. So that was a nice way to maximize, I think, the use of the funds, since it's fairly expensive to sustain multiple people on the road at one time. So once a partner was trained, they would go all over the place on their own. That was the case in Alaska, where a gentleman by the name of Daniel Cornwall just did a tremendous amount of travel and work up there. After I accompanied him on a couple of visits, then he just took and ran with it. It's just great.
And that was also the case in New Mexico. Alana and Gar took the ball and ran with it. So we got a lot of really great places to visit.
All right.
So we part of this, and again, we were learning how to do this and trying to figure out the best way to do this thing. As a tech, of course, what I wanted to do is collect data points on everything that we were asking. I wanted to collect data and see what is the state of things in America. And Susanna, and I miss Susanna, she's not, as James said, she's not with the project anymore. She was really good at keeping our scope focused. And she'd say, Carson, this is not a data collection project. We need to be very careful about overdoing what we're going to do. But there were places that we did need to collect data because we wanted to see how effective things are. Because we know that we needed to show who are we reaching and what is the results. And so this is still not completely finalized because we're getting our final libraries in there. But most of these libraries are a standalone library. That means that they don't have other means of support, not even soft collegial type support. And these are from the pre-intake survey that we took. How frequently is technical or IT support available to the library? As you can see from this chart, only when problems arise or very infrequently limited. And then look at that little sliver of never, that little green sliver. That's heartbreaking to see, right? That means there's no options, and if something goes wrong, they may not know what to do. So in some cases, this is good news to see this bad news, because we know now that we're targeting the libraries that actually need our help the most, even during this pilot process. The next is asking folks to describe their level of experience, and the little blue sliver there is the very experienced. As you can see, that's tiny. Most people have either limited experience or no experience at all, right? So this is a recipe for, wow, this is really needed. We need to provide this training. And we wanted to ask about aspirations, right? We wanted to know what people wanted. And so these are some of the representative quotes that I think, especially if you work with rural libraries or you're from a rural library, they might resonate with you. We want everyone in our community to have free and easy access to the internet. In a large community, and some of my colleagues will say, well, access is not a problem. I beg to differ. Access is a problem in the United States. It's not everywhere. It's not ubiquitous. It's not stable. It's not working correctly. Consistent, reliable internet availability, a sense of comfort when dealing with technology. And I want to educate the public on tech's use so they feel more comfy. Computer tech would like Windows 10 training. So it goes from this beautiful broad to the very specific. And I wanted you to see that because that's how a lot of our conversations went. There would be conceptual like well, we really want to improve our community, and we need to know more about the specific technology so that we can do that. This is what's so great about working with rural communities. We want our students to have every opportunity possible to compete in this global society. We would also like to help bridge the digital divide that many of our students experience. This was from a tribal college. We would like to see every student have access to high-speed internet services, and we'd also like to see broadband internet all across Indian country. right? So these are really good vision statements. We want our community to have the same online opportunities that people in larger communities have. That's huge. That's that equalizing factor. And if we're from, you know how Verizon rolls out 4G and 5G, they look at the NFL cities. Yeah. Right? Because that's where they make the money. So that's where they go first. They go to NFL cities. Everyone else gets it later. It doesn't matter what their dot map says. Eventually, everyone's wired up. But it starts with the NFL cities. And guess who's not in an NFL city? Everyone we visited. Maybe some players are from those communities, but there's no stadiums. And then finally, the internet has become vital for employment. Almost all the jobs in the area are not requiring online applications and classes, and instruction on basic computer use are needed. The only option outside the city limits for internet is satellite internet, which is too expensive for many, and it also works in a strange way. It's good to have. I shouldn't say it works in a strange way. It just doesn't work in a very symmetrical way for folks to get access. I need a strong volunteer base to get the one-on-one help that my patrons need. This is really totally patron. You can see this theme through these comments and others, where people want to serve and do the best job that they can serving their community, and they know that technology is a big piece of that. This was really heartening for me to see, because I work with a lot of folks in technology, and I would say that not all libraries are that connected to the patrons that they serve in that direct way. Like certain staff are, but from the admin on down, not always. Sometimes they're kind of removed from that, and that's one of the beautiful advantages of a smaller library, is that while they don't have the resources often to do what they want to do, if you give them a little kernel, they take the ball and run. Oh, I'm going to keep that. Okay. You might wonder, so what's wrong out there? You just said that there's a lot of things wrong. These are many of the common issues. Insufficient data wiring. Oh my goodness, if I could show you the undocumented data wiring, the mysteries in buildings out in the world is crazy. A lot of it also was inefficient network setups, and this usually happened when you had one person initially set it up, and then someone's friend came in to help with that, and then they got pizza, and then one of them came back to finish the job, and then they left and went to college, et cetera, et cetera. Next thing you know, there's a sprawl of network equipment. There's things that are maybe powered on and not plugged in to the network, or vice versa, things like that. Old and obsolete equipment is a issue, and this is where we found the hook for E-rate for a lot of libraries. Poor Wi-Fi coverage. This is something that everybody understands, and if you want to have fun with like anyone in your life, even your mom, install a Wi-Fi stumbler on their smartphone, if they have a smartphone, and show them how they can see the signal. And they don't have to. It doesn't have to be a mystery why the signal's bad in a certain part of the building. They can walk around and see the building go up or the signal go up and down. And one of my favorite times of doing that was in the New Mexico tribal visits, because most of the buildings are made of adobe, and adobe is mud, but underneath that mud is a metal framework. Which is really good for blocking Wi-Fi signals. And so we were able, because there were connectivity problems around, so we were able to walk around and show how the signal would be pretty good next to the antenna, and then we went behind a wall, and and some of these walls are like a foot thick. It would go, ooh. And that was really cool to see. It's also empowering for the library worker to go, that was just an app I got off the internet, and I can see that signal. I understand what's happening with my Wi-Fi. This is really good. And the other issue, of course, too, are libraries who they don't have, they are not concerned about the reasons a lot of people don't participate in E-rate. They would if they could. They just weren't participating in it because they didn't know where to start, especially with some of these equipment requests. I'll take the next one.
Yeah, so one of we polled the librarians themselves, both before and then after, as Carson kind of articulated some of those quotes. We also were accompanied by what we would call a technical advisor, and that was somebody local to the state who would come with us, and like Daniel Cornwall is a good example I mentioned earlier, from the Alaska State Library. He has that technical broadband kind of technical support role in his job description. So we were able to use the grant to pay for him to get out and do what he normally would do if there were funds available. So that was really good. But we asked them to give us some feedback afterwards, and from several different vantage points, mainly around the toolkit itself. And we really wanted to get eyes on the technical aspects to make sure that we were saying things correctly. We were describing things technically in a very correct way, but also in a way that was an ordinary human could understand. You didn't have to be a networking engineer or anything. So we tracked all that throughout. I won't bore you with the specifics, but we were able to learn a lot from. So we kind of had after a while, your eyes kind of glaze over at looking at these questions. You write them, and then you think, oh, yeah, that's perfect. Oh, that's such a beautifully worded question. Oh, my examples are so awesome. There's no way you could improve on this. And then somebody comes back, and they're like, dude, that's pretty poor. Why don't you try this?
Right.
And you're like, oh, actually, you're right. So we had some good checks and balances, let's say, in the project, which kept us honest. So the measure of success is at the end of it. Do they have? If our goal was to improve the librarian's technical understanding of broadband and their library technical environment from A to Z, and 61% at the end of it, on average, said, we were very satisfied with our improved understanding. That was a good result. We're happy to see that. And these are the specific areas, breaking it down by skill that they acquired or improved their knowledge in. Funding, we spent a lot of time not everywhere, but in a lot of states, we spent a lot of time on E-rate. I think as Carson mentioned earlier, that thing, E-rate's a beast, and it's daunting. And as many of you I could see kind of people grimacing and smiling, but it's gotten better, right? I mean, it's improved iteratively over time, but it's burned a lot of people, and they just sort of like, I just don't want to do it. So we were able to get in there and say, there's this crazy stuff happened in DC a couple of years ago where they actually made it easier, and you can now pay for this sort of stuff. You can actually get some money to pay for your interior wiring, and people are like, Yeah. And so they're taking another run at it. And I think one of the most important findings was the awareness that, hey, I could actually partner with a school that maybe is nearby within line of sight. We could do something really creative, and they've got great connectivity. I've got crummy connectivity. E-rate allows you to share that connection now. So some partnerships were born out of that sort of thing. So that kind of thing. That's a little bit behind the screen there about what we mean by broadband funding.
Absolutely. I think the takeaway from that screen is these were not extensive surveys. We didn't want to survey people to death. I think the takeaway is everything. They had some value just about everything that we were asking about, which is like that's huge, right? That shows you the need that there is for general knowledge on basics.
So pretty good scores in their overall experience. We really didn't just take oh, that was great for an answer. We tried to understand, okay, well, what was so great? If you like it, what exactly worked in it? Are you just saying that? Because there must have been something we could do to improve. And so they would you'd loosen them up over lunch, buy them a shake or something, and you'd say, all right, look. I was a little daunted by the length of it or something, or it broken down, the way it's organized. And so we would get good feedback. But overall, I think it's an honest reflection here of what we, what they felt about it. A lot of people, almost everybody, I guess everybody said they would recommend the process, which is also good.
That's right. That's like my favorite slide.
Oh, if it's your favorite slide, I'll get.
That's my favorite slide because
100%.
Because you don't recommend something that is not of value to you, and but that was really hugely important to us because in small rural communities, this is really reputation based sharing, right? So the reason you succeed or don't succeed is what your reputation is like with your colleagues in a small area. So having that thought, it's not just like, pat us on the back in any way, shape, or form. It made it feel like the work that we were doing was valuable to the people we were visiting. Because again, everyone's busy. And you walk into a one-room, Carnegie Library, for instance, where the top has been closed because it's too dangerous to be in. So the library is now in the basement, right? And there's hardly any money, and you've got this person that is serving an entire community like a whirlwind and doing such a great job. I always hated interrupting them, right, with something like this. But we're going to now tell you about our experiences with librarians.
Yeah, I'll start out with just a couple of stories from the road. This slide is at a location up in Alaska that's pretty rural and remote. It took us about 3 days to get there. Due to weather concerns, they wouldn't fly. There were no roads. If you're familiar with Togiak, Alaska, anybody been to Togiak? It's a Inuit village that is a pretty traditional village that is just set out on the coast, but there's very much living subsistence lifestyle as they have for eons, where the summers are spent kind of hunkered down and fighting off mosquitoes. But when actually winter comes, and they're collecting berries and that sort of thing, winter comes, they can actually get out and move, and that's where they do their hunting for moose and other big game, and not on sleds anymore, but now on snowmobiles. So it was weird, because you go to this little village in the middle of nowhere, and then there's no cars, there's just snowmobiles all over the place, and four-wheelers and stuff. So they did have a library, and it was a pretty darn nice library. You can see the picture here in the top left is the equipment closet. That's a pretty new building. It was built and commissioned, and like a big ceremony about 6 years ago, where they had the state senator come out and the governor. It was like a big launch.
Yeah. Okay.
And but then you start looking a little more closely at that picture, right? You start to think things aren't quite right there. So it's hard to see, but that little we got
if you point.
I don't want to shoot at any
don't
pilots or anything.
Yeah, that's.
All right, so right there's a water heater, and right there's basically all your internet connecting equipment used to. Okay, so this was after the after picture. Before there was stuff sitting on the water heater. So it's kind of tough. You didn't want to be like, you guys are idiots. What are you doing? That wouldn't go over so well. So you have to be, they're just trying to get it to work.
Right.
And so we had situations where we had to sort of suggest kind of casually, maybe we should move stuff off the ground, and just in case that thing ever fails. I'm not, maybe it never will, but just in case, don't want to lose all your equipment. And so we would have try to really have conversation like that where we could, and people were like, oh yeah, shoot, I didn't even think about it. They're just too busy. And so they're like, yeah, of course, yeah, let's move that stuff around. So you started, rolling up your shirt sleeves and actually doing stuff in the closet. In this particular case too, we found out that you can kind of see all the conduit there. It was all wired for wired LAN, but they didn't have any of their computers actually hardwired into those Cat5 connections. So we were able to get them hardwired, and in a place like Togiak, where you're talking about down in the kilobits per second range in terms of connectivity, that you can kind of see the speed test result there is down to the 1.38 kilobits per second upload and 1.21 down, and that was with nobody on it. And they had just bottleneck after bottleneck in there. So we were able to improve that marginally by hardwiring things and identify some other issues that led them to, get that back up to what they were paying for. But it's just you find yourself in these libraries where you're only there for a few hours. You want to do as much as you can to fix things. You don't want to leave them worse off, but you also don't want to leave them sort of feeling overwhelmed, like, wow, this is a total mess. So it was always hard. But we were able, in most cases, when we kind of got in there, we were able to do some good and help them in practical ways. And they really appreciated that at the end of the day. So Carson has some really cool stories from the hot and dusty roads of Texas.
That's right, from the largest state to the second largest state. Right? So this was the map, and I wanted to show you the map because that's all drive time in between those sites. And do we have anyone from Texas in the room? Great. So you know what it's like, right? If you're going to go from site to site, you've got like work to do. You got to figure out where to stay, and you better make good time on your drive and get to where you need to go the night before because it might be too hard the next morning. And so that was part of what factored in. And so I'm gonna go through our Texas visits in reverse order. This is the Palacios Library, which is down on the Gulf Coast. And that's Henry Stokes from the Texas Libraries and Archives Commission. Henry's a great guy. If you don't know Henry, get to know him. He's a really wonderful person and wonderful E-rate person. So he was one of the TSLAC folks that joined me on the trip in Texas. And Palacios was, the staff was really, really good. This was a situation where they had a couple of apprentice folks. So there was a librarian who's been there for, I think, most of her career. And she had two young people who were helping. One person was kind of on the way out. The other one was kind of on the way in. And what was really wonderful about this, because of the skills that the young people had, when we talked about drawing a network diagram, which is part of the toolkit, they jumped on it. So before I even got back to Austin, I was meeting my wife in Austin for a weekend because I love just hanging out in Austin for the weekend. Before I even got back to Austin, they'd done their first draft of the network diagram, and they were saying, is this right? Did we do a good job? Yes, they did. They rocked it. They did really, really well. The Harper Library is awesome because it's the Harper Library and Resale Shop, and so it's right off the FM road, which is for the farm to market. FM Road, Farm to Market, which are the rural highways in Texas, and they have a resale shop that funds the library. So if you haven't been inside of Texas before, it's really interesting. The library support locally is huge. People love their libraries, especially in rural communities, and so they come up with ways to fund them. So in Harper, they have a resale shop. So this is like a thrift shop where people donate stuff, and the library's entire budget is taken from the proceeds of the thrift shop. Volunteers run the thrift shop. Crazy, right? You'd never know that if you didn't stop and ask. So tell me about this resale shop. So Henry and I bought things there. I got some headphones and CDs, and Henry got like an adapter for his, because what are you going to do? You're there. It's a good deal. And it was just great. They actually had a lot of expertise to help too. So we did some more higher level sort of troubleshooting with them. The Coleman Public Library was extremely interesting. They have Coleman has these beautiful murals downtown, which are cool to see. While we were there, and it's also in a very old downtown area, even though that looks refurbished because it's beautifully refurbished. In rural communities built on blocks, a lot of the buildings are very long and narrow, kind of like bowling alleys. So the Coleman Library actually has two of those that are put together. One of them is for community meeting room. The other is predominantly the library. What we discovered, because they had some connectivity problems, is that the city had invested in a fiber project of some sort, and wouldn't you know it, the fiber is coming through the alley behind the building on its way to City Hall. So that's where we were able to suggest advocacy approaches to say, because the library wasn't involved in that decision, that's where we were able to really work through a gut level advocacy approach to say, you should really be on that fiber. That fiber should stop in here, so that you can take a little bit of that bandwidth and then you can just pass it on. It's what's commonly done with fiber. So that was awesome. This is the Carnegie Library of Ballinger, and at this location, this was one of the mystery wiring places that I visited. It looked like they had nothing, but they had installed a network rack in the basement that had like one component in it. But that was a really important part to tracing down. When we're doing the network mapping, we really want to trace things down and find out where it is. We also were able to just talking to the librarian, we were able to discover that there was another, like a mom and pop connectivity provider that was getting a good reputation in the area. They were not happy with the person or the company that was providing their current connectivity. And so we were able to talk about like a strategic approach for investigating the mom and pop, because some of the mom and pops are the way to go in rural areas. And then finally, the Stanford Carnegie Library. I've got Lucy's name up here because she's awesome and someone you should know if you don't know Lucy Wedeking. She's just a dynamo. And Lucy talked about her challenges as a library director at the Texas Library Association conference. And we talked about what happened during the visit. This is an example of a thing from the toolkit where we show what a network diagram is supposed to be like. And then these are my notes and Lucy's notes. We were working together to diagram her network, and this is a picture of her network rack. But afterwards, Lucy was having trouble convincing the city to let her participate in E-rate or to increase the bandwidth. The difference now is that she had good information, knowledge, and good vocabulary to use in that conversation. So she hasn't given up in any way, shape, or form. And if I know Lucy, she's going to make it happen. The main point, though, is to show that when we come in and make the recommendations, we never think that we're done, like goodbye, this is going to be good. It's really thinking about that we're leaving each library worker with the tools that they need to be able to continue having these conversations, because that's our world with technology and connectivity. It's never done. It's kind of a revolution, keeps rolling on.
Okay, next step, yeah. We want to leave a few minutes in case anybody asks questions, so hopefully we're close to wrapping up, I think. So our immediate next step is actually tomorrow. Excited to convene folks on our advisory panel tomorrow. Have a hosted dinner, kind of piggybacking on the fact that a lot of folks in our advisory panel are actually here at ALA. And we had just a sliver of money left to where we could fly everyone else back down here. And so we're going to convene tomorrow for a social event, which ends up being we'll get a lot of good work done as well. And then Monday we'll have a focused agenda where we're going to ask a lot of folks on our advisory panel are also participants in the program. So folks like Ann Jocelyn from Idaho, the state librarian, and Dylan, is it Baker?
Yeah, Dylan Baker.
Dylan Baker, yeah, who's a broadband consultant there at the state library. For example, these are the sorts of folks. Dylan went on the road, and I accompanied him on this project. So they're going to be able to be present in the room with all their other colleagues, and we're just going to ask simple questions like, what worked in your state with this project? What didn't work? And hopefully, that'll just be another opportunity to iterate and the toolkit, improve it a little bit more, but then also ask them, well, what would you like to do to scale this in your state? Would you like to scale it? Would you like to use this and bring it to additional libraries? So we're going to have a conversation about that as well. Now that we've got it kind of ready for release, how do we make sure, my goal with this is at the end of the day, every librarian at some level in every library knows about this as a resource, and mostly at the public and tribal library sort of level. But it could have use in academic libraries as well, I suppose, school libraries. We want to make sure they're aware of it and can take advantage of it. So that's another conversation, is how do we take what we've got and make sure everyone knows about it and can leverage it. And finally, sort of talk a little bit more about if we were to consider doing a phase 2 to this project, what might we ask to do? What might we ask for funding to do? And Carson and I have some thoughts on that, but it would be a great opportunity to also hear from our advisory panel. So it's really going to be a good event. Looking forward to that. And beyond that, in wrapping up a few more site visits, the things that just kind of scheduling wise didn't quite get them all done, but they're in the works, and wrapping those up, writing our the obligatory final report, all the lessons learned and everything, doing that, and then releasing it to the wild. We hope to have this all. Their grant sort of expires in, I think it's the 1st of August. Is it the 31st? I think it's the 1st.
Okay, I think it might
Is
be,
it the
might be
31st?
end of August.
Okay. In my mind, I'm trying to have it all wrapped up well before that.
Right.
So I think I've tricked myself into thinking it's
like when you
August
set
1st.
Your clock a little
Yeah,
fast, so
exactly.
you're not like-
Yeah,
That's
so
a good idea.
it's like that. So I want to make sure it's all kind of wrapped up and done well ahead of the deadline. So this summer, we expect to have the marketing push to make sure everybody knows about it, and the final drafts of all the documents ready to go. All right. So I guess the question, if we were to have a discussion, we have a little time left. It might be interesting to think about, if you have any questions about the project, but then have a little discussion in the 10 minutes or so remaining if you have thoughts on how you might want to use this toolkit in your own state.
Does anybody have any questions? If you do, please step up to the mic, or just shout them out.
Our contact info is here as well. Yeah.
Do you think that you'll have this toolkit ready as library required for next year's E-rate application process?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a state E-rate coordinator, and when we know about this, we would love to push this out.
What state are you in?
Arkansas,
Arkansas. Great.
Oh, okay.
we're very excited about this toolkit.
Really?
Yay,
Okay.
Good.
All right. Well, we
Outstanding.
would love to get your contact information after the the session, and be sure that we put you on our main list, and anyone else here in attendance that would like to keep track of where we're at, so you get some advance notice and can kind of plan when it's coming out and that sort of thing.
That's right.
That would be wonderful.
Okay. Yeah.
Excellent. And did you have a question?
I did. So, does the toolkit include which libraries have already done this in each state? Like, I'm just thinking it would be helpful to know who in Texas we can contact that has already been through this process that can maybe help us.
Sure.
Oh, that's a really good idea. That's a good point.
That's a great.
Yeah,
that's
we
a great question. In your case, in Texas, you can check in with Henry Stokes or Cindy as well. But checking in with TSLAC as the local partner is the quickest way to do that. But I think this idea that you have is awesome to have.
Yeah, I like that.
To create colleagues because that means a lot, right? To be able to check in with how someone else did that. Thank you for that suggestion. That's part of that big spreadsheet is when these great ideas come in, we grab them and throw them in. So thank you.
We've got kind of the makings of that with, we have a Google map that you saw the screenshot of, but it's an actual, so you can click on the little, and it'll bring up the little text box that we could include, with people's permission. We want to ask for permission.
I'm taking notes here. I'm not checking my email. I'm taking notes on that because that is a great one. Great coordinator again.
Yeah. Getting the participants, both the location, but then the actual participant. So there's a contact each.
Yes.
That's a good idea. Thank you for that.
Does the toolkit possibly include a quick checklist of sorts of things that qualify for E-rate funding? Because, for instance, we had a library, we provide a managed Wi-Fi service from our organization. We had a library ask, can I get some E-rate funding on this? And when I tried to probe into that E-rate beyond the curtain, I got a terrible response back. I couldn't get anybody to really answer some of those specific questions.
The answer is no, it does not have that checklist, and it's because of the variations of E-rate assistance in the country. So if we were more localized, I think it would be easier to understand what resources are available. But this is beyond my work with this project. The quality of E-rate consultants throughout the country varies greatly. There's some people, I think everyone does what they're supposed to do. So I'm not saying anyone's falling down on the job, but there are so many that go above and beyond. When that doesn't happen, bad things happen. There was a case that I worked on. I was working with this great E-rate coordinator on the East Coast, kind of an above and beyond sort of guy, taking care of things. He was awesome. There was another one I was working with where I was doing this as a consultant. Put together a list of equipment that needed to be purchased as part of the E-rate cycle. I got it in before the 470 filing. The E-rate consultant never checked to see if there were any bids. And so on the day of the 471, I got an email saying, no one's bid. You got any ideas? And I'm like, yeah, I've got some ideas, but no one's going to respond to these. And they didn't. So the library was out of luck. So I didn't want to, I'm not trying to bash anybody, but that variance makes it very difficult to put in a toolkit because the response will vary based on the E-rate help that the library has. I'm sorry about that.
You can't solve the whole problem.
Right.
We tried to link, that was one of the nuanced, more seemingly simple, but ended up being kind of like, what do you link to in terms of a resource?
Right.
And are they're so ephemeral, and do you want to really link to something that's going to be dodgy and torn down in a week? Or we really tried to think long-term, maintenance and upkeep of the document, and we really just tried to point to things that seem to have some life and longevity. So we do link to a bunch of resources on E-rate that'll kind of get you pointed in the right direction. And then, like Carson said, it's really something you got to go down local and kind of get really to get into those sorts of things.
Have a feel for which states are good E-rate. Who's doing a dynamite job? Which states?
Ooh.
Who's doing it?
Never say who's the bad ones.
I know Nebraska seems to be on the ball with it. Also Arizona. I know these are states that I participate in, and they really did a good job, I thought, with the E-rate. Let's see, who else?
New Mexico Tribes did a good job.
Yeah. I don't know how what their approach is.
Texas has done a great job too.
Yeah.
Texas has struggled with, in fact, during the visit, most of the 5 libraries that I went to, before the toolkit visit, they didn't have an interest in doing E-rate. As part of doing the toolkit, they had an instant interest in doing E-rate because they needed stuff now. And so that cause and effect really came into play. Also, coincidentally, the state of Texas has contracted with E-rate Central, I think, for a 2-year contract so that they could allow or have assistance available for libraries. So by working through Henry, they were able to get them right connected with an E-rate consultant. And what we gave them was what's called the Broadband Improvement Plan, which is the things that needed to be fixed. They were able to use that as the basis of the E-rate request.
Cool, that's right.
Yeah.
Just anecdotally, also, like California, while we didn't purchase, they weren't formally a partner in our grant. I know just from other experience that they're doing a fantastic job, both in terms of leveraging the local funds available specific to California, but then enhancing those with the national E-rate funds. And they seem to be on the ball there. They've done a tremendous amount of work in a fairly short amount of time with the Scenic is the regional, state and regional network there. And I mean, the improvement in the connectivity in these libraries, partially driven and funded by E-rate, but also some really good leadership in the legislature, which valued the arguments that were being made about improving broadband in California. They just seem like they're on the ball. So I've been very impressed to see the progress made in a fairly short amount of time in California. With that, any other questions? I think we're about at the top of the hour. All right, well,
Thanks for coming.
thank you very much.
Yes,
Appreciate
thank you so
it.
much.